What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I am back with a video. This time we'll be talking about the greatest finals upsets in NBA history. And when talking about the NBA finals, you always love to see great players have great games, and of course, you love a great Game 7. But possibly the best thing you could have in a finals series is a great upset. So that is what I'm going to show you guys today, the 5 greatest upsets in finals history. Now before we get into that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure to do so, and if you could like this video, I greatly appreciate it. So with that being said, let's get into the video. So first up at number 5, we have the 1977 NBA Finals, the Portland Trailblazers versus the Philadelphia 76ers. And at this point, Portland was in their 7th year in the NBA, and they had never made the playoffs up to this point. So entering this year, Portland had no real expectations to compete for the championship, let alone win it, as they won 49 games and finished with the 3rd best record in the Western Conference. Now, if you look at their road to the finals in the first round, they beat the Bulls 2-1, they beat the Nuggets 4-2, and they swept Cleveland's Lakers 4-0. And in the finals, they played the Philadelphia 76ers, led by Dr. J, Doug Collins, George McGinnis, Roll B. Free, Henry Bebby, and Daryl Dawkins. One of the more underrated teams of all time, as they were stacked from top to bottom with tons of basketball talent. And because of that great talent, Philadelphia was heavily favored in this series. And through the first 2 games, you could definitely see why, as they were up 2-0. But near the end of that game 2, Maurice Lucas and Daryl Dawkins will get into a fist fight that would totally alter the series, as Portland won Game 3 by 22 points, Game 4 by 32, Game 5 in Philly by 6, and Game 6 by only 2 points, as George McGinnis missed a game-tying jumper. And this series was already a great upset, but the fact that Portland was down 0-2 and won 4 straight games elevates the upset of this series. And if you look at how the Blazers players played in this series, it was a very well-balanced team. You had 4 guys averaging over 15 points per game, and you had 5 guys in double digits. And this 77 finals is a classic example of talent versus teamwork, as Philadelphia had the more talented roster top to bottom, but Portland played as a team, and they won the championship because of that. That's why I think the 77 finals is the 5th biggest upset in finals history. Now looking at number 4, we have the 2016 finals, winning the Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors. And I know many people would say this series was not a major upset, as Cleveland was a very talented team with the best player in the NBA. But I will explain to you guys why this series was indeed a major upset. But first, let's look at this Cavs team and their road to revenge during the 2016 season. So the Cavs this year won 57 games, and when it came to the playoffs, they breezed through the Eastern Conference, beating Detroit 4-0, Atlanta 4-0, and Toronto 4-2. And this set up the much anticipated finals rematch of Golden State versus Cleveland. And coming out the 2015 finals, where Kyrie and Kevin Love were hurt, this was definitely a big time opportunity to get revenge on that Golden State team. And like you guys know, Golden State this year won 73 games, an NBA record, and they were the favorites in this series. But with that being said, Cleveland was also a very talented team, and after going down 3-1, everyone in the league said this series was over, no team's ever coming back from that, and there was really no feeling that Cleveland had any fight left. But over those last 3 games, LeBron James as well as Kyrie will play terrific. In Game 5, they both had 41 points. Game 6, LeBron had 41. And in Game 7, hit a 27-point triple-double, the iconic block, and Kyrie had this shot. And that 3-game stretch is why I say this series was definitely an upset, because no team in NBA history had ever blew a 3-1 lead in the finals. And like I said before, nobody thought Cleveland could win that championship, and they upset a lot of people and a lot of NBA fans. So when looking at this final series, it may not be the traditional upset like you guys think, but it still was an upset as Cleveland came back from a 3-1 deficit. That's why I ranked it at the number 4 spot. Now next up, we have the 1969 NBA Finals from the Boston Celtics and the LA Lakers. And this year for Boston was a very mediocre year, as they only won 48 games and had the 4th best record in the Eastern Conference. And that was the lowest win total and the lowest seed in the Bill Russell era. And speaking of Bill Russell, this was his last year in the NBA, and this was his last ever finals appearance. And the same can be said for one Sam Jones. Now in this series, LA and Boston, they would meet for the 6th time, and Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell would meet for the 9th and final time. And from what I can tell, the overall thought at the time was that Boston was too old, Russell was past his prime, and they weren't going to win this championship. And through the first 2 games in LA, you could definitely see why they were favored, as Jerry West had 53 points in Game 1, a Lakers victory, and 41 points in Game 2, also a Lakers victory. So they were up 2-0 heading back to Boston for Game 3. Now Boston would win Game 3, and in Game 4, it would come down to the wire as they only won by 1 point thanks to Sam Jones, who had a game-winning jumper. And that jump shot by Sam Jones is one of the forgotten moments in finals history, as if he misses that shot, Boston goes down 3-1 and most likely loses this series. Now in Game 5, LA would win. Game 6 back in Boston will be Sam Jones and Russell's last ever game in the Boston Garden. And in this game, Boston won by 9 points, sending it back to LA for deciding Game 7. And this Game 7, much like this series, is an iconic game. And one of the iconic stories is that before this game, the Lakers owner had put balloons in the rafters to celebrate a championship after they won. And the Celtics team, seeing this, added extra fuel and extra motivation to win this Game 7 for Bill Russell and Sam Jones. And much like Game 4, it would come down to the wire in the final quarter. And in the last 5 minutes, Wilt Chamberlain will go out with a severe knee injury, and Don Nelson would have a clutch time jumper to clinch the championship for the Boston Celtics. So in this game, Bill Russell won his last ever game versus Wilt, his last game versus the Lakers, and he won his last ever championship. And the cherry on top for this series is that Boston was not favored, and they still beat the Lakers. And this Celtics team actually is the third oldest championship team in NBA history, once again proving they're massive underdogs, and nobody saw them winning this series or that Game 7 in LA. That's why I rank it as the third greatest upset in NBA Finals history. Now looking ahead, we have the 2004 Finals between the Pistons and the LA Lakers. Now if you didn't know, this Detroit team won 54 games and the second best record in the Eastern Conference. But overall, looking at the league, the talent was definitely in the West, and the overall thought at this time was that the Spurs, the Lakers, or some Western Conference team was going to win the title, as the East was the inferior conference. And one of the forgotten parts of this 04 Pistons season is that Rasheed Wallace was acquired via trade, and that totally changed this Pistons roster and gave another scorer and a great teammate. And we're looking at the road to the finals. They beat Milwaukee 4-1, the Nets 4-3, and the Pacers 4-2, setting up a final series of LA versus Detroit. Now in this series, the Lakers had home court advantage, and they were the heavily favored team as they had Shaq, Kobe, Derek Fisher, and old Karl Malone and Gary Payton. But very similar to the 1977 finals, this was the case of team versus talent. Detroit, top to bottom, had a better overall team, but LA had the most talented players. And if you look at their roster in this series, Richard Hamilton averaged 21, Chauncey also averaged 21, Rasheed added 13, Ben Wallace added 11, and Tayshaun Prince added 10. And the staggering part of this series is that LA only averaged 81.8 points per game in this series, and the Pistons locked down Kobe as he only shot 38%. And you also had Derek Fisher shooting 30%, Devin George shooting 39%, Karl Malone shooting 33%, Gary Payton 32%, and the entire Lakers team shooting 41%. And the guy who should get most of the credit is one Ben Wallace, one of the greatest defenders in NBA history, and he dominated in this series, and he actually played Shaq very good in this matchup. So the 04 Finals were definitely an upset. Nobody saw Detroit winning, and everyone penciled in LA as winning their 4th championship. That's why I rank this series as the second greatest upset in Finals history. So moving on, looking at the number 1 spot, we have the 2011 Finals, the Dallas Mavericks versus the Miami Heat. And this series right here is one of the best series of all time. You had Dirk Nowitzki on a mission to win his first ever championship. You had Jason Terry playing his best basketball, and you had very good defensive players like Shawn Marion as well as Tyson Chandler playing better than ever. And from an overall sense, this Dallas team was not supposed to be in the finals, let alone win the championship. And we're looking at the road to the finals. They beat Portland in 6, LA in 4, and OKC in 5. And Dallas in those last 2 rounds versus LA and OKC, they were definitely the big time underdog, as both those teams had more overall talent. And the same thing can be said in the finals versus the Big 3 Heat with LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and D Wade. This series heading into it, 90% of people had penciled in the Heat to win the championship, and through the first 3 games, everyone looked right, as Miami was up 2-1. And in Game 4, heading into the 4th quarter, Dallas was down by 4 points. But in that 4th quarter, Dirk went off, having 10 points, compared to the Big 3 Heat, who only had 9 combined. And down the stretch, Dirk had some big-time shots to avoid the 3-1 hole. And looking at Game 5 also in Dallas, the Mavericks won by 9 points, and in Game 6, back in Miami, they won by 10 points, being led by JT, who had 27 points, and Dirk also added in 21. And in Game 6 victory, they clinched the championship for the Dallas Mavericks. So overall, top to bottom, this Dallas team had a great all-time playoff run, and in the finals, they upset the heavy favorite Miami Heat, who had more talent top to bottom. I think that right there could summarize this whole video. Almost all these finals upsets were talent versus teamwork, and in the end, teamwork came out on top. You can't always say that, but when it happens, it's definitely great to see. So I don't want to go too long, and this right here is the end of the video. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time.